Dr. Stone, Episode 8, recap, go. So we start off with our roadmap to the sulfa drugs after deciding that they're not going to go after penicillin because they don't want to just rely on lucky mold growing. They start collecting iron sand for iron, which is the first bit of their roadmap, while they're looking for iron in the river because Chrome figures out that he has magnets, or I guess Senku figures out that Chrome has magnets, so they can pull up all the iron sand in the riverbed. While that's happening, they meet a watermelon named Suika, who's really just a little girl that wears watermelon rind on her head for reasons I'll probably get into in the spoilers. Then, once they have all their sand collected up, they get it all in a furnace and completely fail to make some iron. Senku realizes that he needs some more manpower, and they put Suika out on her very first task as the great detective Suika, and she finds out that there is a bit of a food, not shortage, doldrum, let's say. There's a food doldrum. Everyone's just kind of bored. They live on a river, so they mostly just eat fish and, whatever fruits and veggies they can grow. But a couple of people in the town are both saying, we want some more new foods. And so Senku figures out that he can make the most scientifically delicious dish that everyone in the world loves. It's ramen. And I mean, how can you disagree with the man? So we end the episode with a big old villain face from Senku saying, "I'm going to dominate this town with tasty science." And that's the episode. So I guess I should move on to what did I like? There's a lot in this episode. There's a lot to love in this episode. From Senku realizing the scale of just how different the world is going to be with the North Star changing position, all the way to Suika just being all happy, and he's the first man who's never asked why I wear a watermelon rind on my head. He must know that I don't want people to see my face, and he's being so nice and kind and courteous. And then that immediately gets undercut by Kohaku and Chrome just being like, no, he doesn't really care. He just knows that you're being useful right now, so he's going to let you be useful to him. The roadmap's really cool. I love that the show just kind of lets you see where it's going and lets you kind of hopefully come to terms with some of the things you're seeing on there. So like the thing that got me the first time I watched this was the sulfuric acid that they need to collect for the sulfa drug that he's talking about. And if you know anything about sulfuric acid, it's dangerous to collect with modern advancements. I mean, obviously people can do it safely with our modern advancements, but like that's something where you need fail safes on fail safes on fail safes, and if things go wrong, people will very heartily die. And it is just a terrifying thing to deal with everything that modern humans have, and thinking like, obviously I don't know all that much about the processes and the modern equipment we have for it, but I feel like most people, given Senku's situation, would be like, how in the ever loving heckin' heck are we supposed to get some of the most dangerous substance to man, without anyone dying? Like, if the wind moves the wrong way, everyone dies. And that's I don't know. I guess we'll get into it when we get into that episode because that's arguably one of my very favorite episodes. I know it's amazing. Episode seven's really good, but it's not the best in this whole show. Um, but yeah, the roadmap is really fun to kind of pause, look at, and just kind of think of, well, how in the world are they gonna come up with this? Um, what else do I like? I love the. There's a lot of good. It's not even really splash art, I guess. It's just variations on the same art style is really interesting. I love when Senku and Chrome are busy kind of talking about all the people in the village and calling Kahaku a gorilla, and eventually uh, they. Oh no, it's when they come back to it. Chrome calls her a gorilla later on in the episode, and it smash cuts to a shot where Kahaku, her head is just absurdly large and taking up like 3/4 of the screen, and you see Chrome with his clothes all folded and bowing to her on the side, apologizing. Um, there's that. Obviously, we get an actual splash art of the great Detective Suika, which I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes, so a little girl wearing a watermelon rind and then a little Sherlock Holmes hat and the classic uh, over jacket is really adorable to me. And it's not the last time we see the great Detective Suika. Uh, uh, More stuff that I like. We get to hear some of the villagers' voices. We get to hear that Magna is big strong man, and he's got the greedy little yes, you can do whatever you want little who's Gaston's little butt buddy from Beauty and the Beast? I don't remember. I don't remember. But yeah, we have LeFou. There he is. We have total Gaston and LeFou. We don't know their names yet, so I guess that's what I'll call them. Uh, but yeah, and then of course we get some of the older elderly people have a conversation. I think his name is Garen. The town glutton is how Suika refers to him. We see him a few more times. He's got voice lines, and of course we hear a little bit more from the chief, and that we hear that Kahaku is in fact disowned by the chief. We heard before that their relationship isn't great, but he out and out says, "Oh darn it! I disowned that girl, and she still breaks all of the rules." Um, which I think is kind of a dumb thing to say. If you're gonna disown someone, why would you expect their behavior to get better? But that's just my parenting advice. I'm not planning on disowning my son just because he acts out a little bit. But yeah, and like honestly, I think that if you're not kicking your child out of the tribal village, just being like, "You're not my daughter," isn't necessarily a great way to go about things. Like, maybe try to understand where she's coming from, or fucking do the dickhead chief thing and just kick her out entirely. Saying that someone isn't your daughter so they need to listen to you better is not a good way to handle a rambunctious child, I would imagine. But again, that's just my parenting take. I'm probably not the best parent in the world. Um, but what is there more to like in this episode? Obviously, we get to learn how to make ramen. That's cool. We also a little bit of a history lesson. We find Senku tells us that apparently the first person to invent ramen came up with it in the 4th century. And he's kind of talking about, I don't know if he's talking about like specifically the dish ramen or just like noodles, because he is talking about how like noodle making when he comes up with that. So I'm not 100% sure if Mongolians came up with like specifically, the wavy noodles you throw all of your broth and meat and veggies in with all of that to make specifically the ramen dish, or if it is like he's talking about just some dude mixed eggs and flour together and came up with noodles for the first time. So I don't. It's interesting. I feel like Senku could have been a little bit more specific, but that is just my opinion. Oh yeah, everybody freaking out over how good the ramen is, and then Senku letting you know, hey, maybe Fox Malay isn't the best way to make your flour. Yeah, green ramen is kind of one of the more disgusting visuals in this show. There's not a whole lot of like grossness to Dr. Stone. Looking at green ramen, there's just something a little bit wrong with that in my opinion. But I don't know. Could just be me. Alright, so why don't we talk about what did I not like? I don't think there's much. I do think it's a little bit weird that Senku doesn't ask why Suika has a watermelon rind on her head, because I get that he doesn't care, but at the same time, that's an interesting piece of attire for a child to choose on their own. And like the fact that the Kohaku says that she's always wearing it, I feel like Senku, he's distracted trying to get as much iron dust as he can at the time. Maybe he wouldn't really think to ask at that particular time. But it feels like Senku would be one of the first people to ask, you know, why is this... Not even necessarily why is this happening, but like, bare minimum, why this particular watermelon rind? And then that might obviously lead into the discussion of, oh, it's any watermelon rind, but there's this specific reason why I wear it, and then he would come to a conclusion that he gets to later on very, very quickly and solve a few problems. And I think I'm answering my own question because there needs to be problems in later episodes of this anime. So, other things that I don't like. You see the LeFou character? I fucking hate that guy. Yeah, I guess there's not a lot that I don't like. Just the one thing. Just Senku. Yeah, I don't know, because again, it is him being focused as opposed to him being apathetic. Uh, when I'm, thinking back on it now, because he's really focused on, hey, we're only at the first step of this roadmap. Let's get some iron. So, I guess, I guess we can put Senku's curiosity to rest while he's busy with something else. But, I don't like that Senku doesn't understand that 4 people with basic blowing things aren't going to be able to keep up with the pace to smelt their iron, because of course they can't. Like, one of their 4 people is like a 6 to 8 year old girl, roughly, probably. I don't know. I should probably look up the canonical age of the characters in the show. But like, maybe he thought Kohaku was gonna do it all by herself, but him saying that they're trying to keep up the absurd pace for 20 to 30 hours, like, he should have known that 4 people aren't gonna be able to get that going. And I guess it is his first experimentation, but once he got to, minute 45 and they're not getting, I don't know, I feel like he would recognize that, like, they're not getting it to the temperature that they need to, because, I mean, they're sitting really close to that furnace. You'd think that Senku would have some way to measure the temperature to some degree of, like even if it was just a we're there sort of thing, and after an hour of them probably not even getting close to reaching the threshold they need, it would, I don't know, it makes sense that they would give up and start working on the thing earlier, But at the same time, I guess I can see showing the audience like, hey, this really is not going to work no matter how hard they try. So, yeah, two very forgivable things I don't like. So I'd say this episode's pretty good in general. Um, let's talk about spoilers. Uh, so they talk about there's the criminal who left the village. We won't hear about him until the next season. I think he's the one douchebag that gets offed. Yeah, I think he's like one of the first casualties in the war between the village and Tsukasa. But that might be someone else. He might have just been the crazy guy from the old world. I don't remember. But we definitely don't hear more about this outlaw for a long, long time. So don't worry about that. Yeah, the LeFou character is a real piece of shit. Magna is a real piece of shit for a while. He eventually turns into a good guy right around the time that LeFou character just kind of turns into scenery as opposed to a speaking role. Um, there was another spoiler I noticed. It's really early on in this episode. Maybe that was it, because they do mention the criminal near the beginning. Oh, well, I guess it's not spoilers, but things that I like is they reiterate the Japanese lesson I talked about in the last episode. I completely forgot about it, and I might have missed it the first time, but they do go back into the kin meaning gold and jin meaning silver. So that's fun. I was right. I like being right about things. I don't know. I'm excited to get into some of the Anasari again. Anasari, I think. It's either Ansari or Anasari. I can't quite remember. But Gen's showing up, and he's one of my very favorite characters in this show. And he should be here next episode because it's when everybody's having ramen for the first time. He shows up and asks for a Coke. And I really, you know, I appreciate a man who knows how to make an entrance, and he makes one hell of a good entrance. Oh, also, we find out things that about Ruri, the priestess. She apparently has lots of knowledge about things that this stone world doesn't have in it. Like, all of them understand what a gorilla is, and there's some. I've never actually seen or heard of this movie series, I want to say. It's either a movie series or maybe a manga series about some dude who fights and or tames animals. It looks like Japan's version of the Beastmaster, but he's also got like a Terminator look to the splash art they do of the guy. I honestly, it sounds pretty badass in like a cheesy 80s flick sort of way. I kind of wanna look up what this guy is all about. But yeah, we find out that Rune is, or using the suffix, we find out that Ruri has a lot of knowledge. She teaches everyone in the village all of their big wordy words, and yeah, it tells them all about. Well, we don't hear that she tells them all about the history, but we do find out that that is kind of the priestess's job, is to hold information for the settlers. Or settlers, the villagers. So I still can't think of that other spoilery thing, so I guess I'm just gonna move on to my closing segment. So what is, in fact, the big takeaway to this episode? Honestly, that cooking is science. Let's get into that. That's a really, really important thing that a lot of people don't kind of take into consideration is without scientific it, without scientific advancements, we do not have most of the meals we have today. And sometimes I think science has gone too far with our cooking. Uh, like, I don't know, boba tea. I get that it's cool, and it is really tasty, and it's really cool, and I don't know how it's done, but it seems a bit extra just for a caffeine drink. But, I mean, I would say the same about, like, everything on the Starbucks menu. Yeah, let's go with everything on the Starbucks menu is also maybe science went a bit too far. Uh, but that's, I mean, that's all that this show is it shows that without the scientific method and without advancement, we don't get any of the modern conveniences that we have in these days. Like, if it's not for people like Chrome who just want to try everything and they feel that it's their job to be unafraid of the unknown, without those people, you don't get boba tea, you don't get double shot, no ice, float coconut double macchiato or whatever the fuck your Starbucks order is. That doesn't happen without all of the same people who are building like gunpowder and wheel and pulley systems and medicine and I mean fucking space heaters eventually. Like they're so interconnected that even if something sounds boring to you, you don't know what doors solving that thing are going to open up for everyone else in the world to do their own thing. No one figured out how to properly keep ice so that you could have an iced macchiato. They did it so that their food isn't going to go rotten. But now that we can put ice wherever we want and basically keep it cool and keep it around, something that used to be a really near impossible commodity for your everyday person is something that everyone takes for granted. I'd imagine that back in the day, if you wanted like ice in a cup, that would cost extra. Like at some point in history, getting ice cubes for whatever drink you've just bought had to have cost extra. And now places put in too much ice so they don't have to give you all the soda. That's absurd. We should be thanking every single day whatever gods or higher power that you choose to believe or not believe in. You should be so thankful that you live in a world that ice is somehow extra space. It's not important. It's trash. It's filler. And the same can be said about salt too. If you want if you want to think of how expensive popcorn could be at a movie theater these days, think of paying more than its weight in gold for salt on your popcorn. Are you really putting salt on that popcorn, or are you using it to save your meat? Yeah, so I guess we'll end this rant there. Cooking is science. If you like food, thank your science teacher.